My name is Sheila Cohen. I am the president of the Connecticut Education Association, the state's largest teacher organization. With me today are also officers Jeff Leake, vice president of CEA, and Pat Jordan, CEA secretary. We also have our Don Williams, our CEA Director of Policy, Research and Reform, as well as Mark Waxenberg, our Executive Director, and 4 teachers who are representative of the extraordinary number of teachers who have a deep and passionate concern about Connecticut's current approach to testing. And I would like to introduce to you Annie Irvin, a 3rd grade teacher, Ted Gerner, an 8th grade science teacher, Juanita Harris, a school guidance counselor, as well as Bruce Yarnell, a special ed teacher. Let me begin by stressing that we agree that testing has an important role in our public schools, but we underscore the fact that testing should promote student growth and student development over time. That being said, SBAC, the SBAC test, is not doing that. And very bluntly speaking, SBAC is harmful to our children. This situation must be addressed, and the situation must be addressed now. Our students need and our students deserve valid and authentic testing, not the unreliable SBAC that takes far too much time away from valuable classroom instructional time. So we are here today to call upon the governor and to call upon our state legislators to join with the majority of states in the United States that have already replaced the federally sponsored SBAC or PARCC tests with better, more authentic, and effective assessment programs. The lengthy SBAC test is not developmentally appropriate or fair for students, especially those who are young, in special ed or English language learning classes, or come from homes without regular computer access, or from economically disadvantaged school districts. So here's the good news. With the recent passage of the new historic legislation, ESSA, which stands for Every Student Succeeds Act, the federal government has eliminated so many of the testing mandates and given our state lawmakers unparalleled opportunity. This opportunity enables Connecticut to emphasize learning and underscore classroom instruction instead of punishing students with tests that provide no real benefit to their education and does nothing more than, in some cases, give our precious children the mistaken message that they are failures over and over and over. And ladies and gentlemen, that is just plain wrong, and it is not acceptable. And with that being said, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Don Williams.
Thank you very much, Sheila. We live in a very important time in public education in the state of Connecticut and in the United States. What happened in Washington, D.C. recently, in a bipartisan way, was historic and incredibly important. They don't agree on much in Washington, D.C., but they agreed to end the misguided mandates that have hurt our children and have not succeeded. The Every Child Succeeds Act has the potential to end the explosion of standardized testing that we've seen in our schools, the testing that has hurt and not helped students and education in Connecticut. We can now pursue Connecticut solutions to Connecticut challenges, instead of the one-size-fits-all federal scheme that has failed our students. Specifically, this means that we can replace the so-called SBAC or Smarter Balanced test, which is neither smarter nor balanced. It takes most students between 8 and 12 hours to complete. It provides no useful feedback to teachers about how their students are doing, and it has disrupted schools throughout our state. All Connecticut students deserve authentic, classroom-based assessments that strengthen their skills, not tests that take away from classroom learning and provide no educational benefit. While replacing the SBAC test will benefit all of the students in the state of Connecticut, it will especially benefit younger students, English language learners, and students who need special accommodations. That test is developmentally inappropriate for these students. It causes more harm than good. And the awkward computer format of this test also discriminates against students without computer access at home. It creates an unfair technology gap that hurts students in high poverty districts and fails to provide a clear picture of the achievement gap. There is a better way. With the right changes at the state level, we can shift the focus to the needs of our students rather than focusing on tests that are not valid, not reliable, and not fair. Connecticut can design assessments for the benefit of students, not for the benefit of testing consortiums. The state's mastery examination, which will be meeting throughout 2016, can recommend that we as a state move forward, because the new federal law allows up to 7 states to innovate, to lead, to develop high-quality assessments that reflect and support their students' education, assessments that are not off-the-shelf standardized tests. The state of New Hampshire is doing this right now, as are schools in New York's Performance Standards Consortium. They measure student growth and development where it happens in the classroom through learning projects and portfolios of student work. Now, last October, we, as an association, the Connecticut Education Association, went to all 4 corners of the state, all the counties in Connecticut, to talk to teachers, to get their direct feedback as to the SBAC test, its impact on students and schools. So we have a short video we'd like to show you, and if that's ready, we'll roll that now with their comments. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Don. My name is Ted Gerner. I'm from West Hartford. One of my biggest concerns about the SBAC is that it is a computerized test. And because it's now a computerized test as opposed to the CMT tests, that ushers in a whole new host of variables. And these are variables that can't be controlled. At least they're not being controlled yet. One of those variables in particular is the platform, the kind of computer that the students are testing on. If you can't control the variables, then you can't make valid comparisons. And if you can't make valid comparisons, then you don't have a valid test. And if you just look at one of these variables, if you compare the screen size, for example, of a Chromebook to the screen size of a typical desktop monitor, there's a huge difference. Chromebook, 60 square inches, it's 6 inches by 10. A typical desktop monitor, 18 by 10 inches, it's 180 square inches. It's 3 times the screen size. The font size is double on a regular desktop computer compared to a Chromebook. If you're looking at an SBAC test on a Chromebook and you're looking at the toolbar, the words on that toolbar are written in 7-point font. It's less than 1 millimeter tall. It's tiny. That's just one of the many variables. I won't even go into the mechanics of how hard it is to navigate the SBAC test with a Chromebook. But if you can't control these variables, you can't make valid comparisons over time, comparing one child's growth. You can't compare child to child, district to district, or state to state because you're not comparing apples to apples. So my main point is, if you can't make valid comparisons, it's not a valid test. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Juanita Bush Harris from Danbury, Connecticut. I am a school counselor in the school system there. And I stand before you to speak on behalf of our ELL population. We have ELL students transitioning into our Connecticut school systems with varying skill levels, speaking various languages. Some of our students come to us with no formal education. Some have very little education. And many of the students come with an education background in which they are not speaking the English language at all. Now, regardless of the transitioning students' English ability or their time in the country, they are expected and even required to have the language skills and the technology skills to understand and take the SBAC. Here are the results that we are seeing. Our students are exhibiting excessive levels of distress, insecurity, anxiety, on top of what they're already transitioning with. There are increased levels of lack of resiliency. We have students that are disengaging from learning because of the experience that they're coming into having to take this test. There is also loss of significant instructional and learning time. So I say to you that the SBAC, as far as our ELL population is concerned, may be invalid. It certainly is harmful, and we need to look and see if it is discriminatory. Thank you.
My name is Bruce Yarnow. I teach special education, grade 7 at Mystic Middle School. And as a special education teacher, I was taught to ensure the assessments given actually assess what they're supposed to assess. For example, my students take a math test or a math quiz. I read the problems to them. I reword them or paraphrase them, so I'm testing their math ability and not their reading comprehension skills. The math assessments on the SBAC assess my students' reading comprehension ability just as much as their mathematical abilities. My students generally are not on grade level. They don't read on grade level. That's why they're with me. So they can't determine what the math operations, the math questions are asking them to perform. Briefly, my students can probably do the math if they can understand the questions. And to make it worse for my students, as Tony alluded, the SBAC is on the computer, which adds the demands put on my students' mental capacities. They basically have difficulty processing information with a learning disability. So the computerized test adds yet another level they need to process, they need to go through to understand information. Basically, it's an attempt to read and comprehend the article. Then they scroll over and look at the question. Then they go back and look at the article. Then they go back and look at the question. This is all what they're doing before they're attempting to actually write the answer in the text box provided by SBAC. For the math problems, let's just say that if you ever try to use the embedded calculator, online calculator, using the keypad, the QWERTY keypad, not the number pad, just typing numbers up there, it gets frustrating very quickly. I had one student who was trying to do it. I was putting forth a great effort, honest effort, but at a certain point he just got too frustrated, and I think he just gave up. Not because he couldn't do the math, because we got frustrated with the calculator and stopped working. And all this further ensures that I'm assessing my special education students' ability to interface with the SBAC and not the academic skills the SBAC is supposedly trying to assess. Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Annie Irvin. I have taught third graders in East Hartford for 10 years, and I enjoy the students and my career immensely. But one part of my job is helping third graders navigate their first exposure to a high-stakes standardized test. And I'm troubled by the amount of SBAC preparation that cuts into our precious instructional time with my students. It is impossible to cover the topics and subjects we should cover, and our test prep diet tries to address the achievement and opportunity gaps in artificial ways. For example, we may spend hours practicing on paper and pencil copies of canned passages, then more hours teaching students how to transfer their reading skills onto a computer, and more time coaching, cajoling, convincing students that they can sustain enough stamina to attempt what will be long and dry reading passages on the test. And this is all while trying to teach them how to type, which they can't do in grade 2 because their little fingers are too short. SBAC eats away at the amount of meaningful instruction teachers are able to provide, and it does not inform instruction. Excessive testing and test prep is not the academic nourishment Connecticut students need. It's really hard to believe that policymakers in Connecticut want to sacrifice opportunity and access to a more well-rounded education in the name of a single high-stakes standardized score. A different approach is needed. Children really need more one-on-one and small group instruction with educators, spending time with adults and their peers, reading, discussing, pondering, critiquing, debating. All of those things are really important. This is what makes them thoughtful, well-rounded citizens. They also need more exposure to chapter books, informational text, magazines, authentic literature, plays, and that takes time. They need the time to delve into those. Writing, plenty of writing is also paramount. Kids also need time for research and for presenting. But all of this takes time, valuable time, that excessive testing puts in jeopardy. Finally, students need to see school and learning as a positive experience. That requires expanding their horizons, not narrowing them with SBAC. Thank you.
Thanks, Annie. We'll open it up to questions.
Specifically, after all this, what would you like to see the state and the legislature do?
Open up the mastery examination for the 3rd through the 8th grade to an RFP, or request for proposals, process, so that Connecticut could move forward working either with a vendor or designing its own mastery examination. And this is not a new course. The majority of states in the United States are moving away from the federal consortiums of SBAC and PARC, the two main federally sponsored tests. Other states are moving forward with their own authentic tests, testing their own high curriculum standards.
Would that be different, Don, than the regular mastery tests? I'm just confused.
No, that would be the replacement for SBAC as the mastery test for the 3rd and the 8th grade. The state board already has moved to replace SBAC at the high school level with the SAT.
Do you think it should not be a computerized test? I was hearing about all the problems with Chromebooks versus desktops.
You know, that's an excellent question. I think everybody knows that we have moved into a digital world, and everyone knows that computer fluency is very important for students in the 21st century. But as Ted Gerner mentioned earlier, if you're considering validity of testing and you want an apples-to-apples result, then if you have certain students without computer skills taking a test on a tiny monitor on a Chromebook versus someone who's got an iPhone and an iPad and access to computers at home and the internet, and they may be taking the test on a desktop or with a large monitor, right there you've got differences that arguably undermine the validity of the outcome. So either we provide that test in a computerized format in the same way to all students, and those students without computer access at home, we provide them greater access, and this is not going to happen overnight, or we find a better way as we work toward that goal to ensure validity and an apples-to-apples comparison.
I don't quite get like what exactly is wrong with SBAC compared to whatever replacement assessment you would come up with. It seems like if you came up with a replacement assessment, you'd still have all the prepping and all the, you still have the same issues to a degree. Is it just that the questions on SBAC are so unfair, or what would you really accomplish by shifting to a different test?
Well, unfortunately, some have characterized SBAC as a mile wide and an inch deep. They try and cover every single aspect of the Common Core curriculum, and that's why it takes so long. An average student between 7 and 8 hours, but some students 10, 11, 12 hours, in some cases even more. And other students who give up, quite frankly, click through and they're done in a relatively short amount of time because they have given up. So part of the problem is the length. We can have a shorter test that gets this done. But there's also the validity questions that I talked about in terms of the computer format. It's not just the computers. The format itself is very awkward. And for example, the so-called toolbox that they use on the math side of the test is very difficult for some students, even those with computer fluency, to manipulate. It's not like a video game. It's not as intuitive as what some folks are used to. So those are our questions as to validity. Also, one of the supposed benefits of SBAC is that it is adaptive. So as students are taking the test, if they get a wrong answer, the next question will be supposedly a little easier than the last question. Or if they get a question right, the next question will be a little more difficult than the last question. Well, some have raised the question as to, regardless of whatever benefits the adaptivity may provide, what about the validity? If at the end of the day, no student is taking the exact same test that any other student took because the questions are different, then what does that say about the validity and our ability to compare apples to apples? Yes?
The test that you're proposing is a replacement. Would you see that as also based on Common Core standards?
Any assessment has to be based on strong standards. And we are in support of the strong standards that are in place in the state of Connecticut. I mean, they're called Common Core, but Connecticut was a leader in the United States in terms of having strong standards prior to Common Core. So yes, any test that our students take have to be based on the standards that are being used in the classroom. And I say in the classroom because unfortunately one of the other problems with SBAC is that oftentimes, because it is off the shelf, it's testing aspects of curriculum that students have not gotten to yet. And that is a problem as well.
Some of the defenders of standardized testing will say that one of the major benefits for all the problems that they come with is that they've laid bare the stark contrast between performance of kids in low socioeconomic circumstances versus those in higher socioeconomic circumstances. You know, would the test that you're proposing accomplish the same thing?
Well, I believe that we owe the students in high poverty districts, the students in the greatest need in the state of Connecticut, a fair and reliable and valid assessment. Because right now, they are being punished. So many of those students do not have the same kind of computer access. This test specifically discriminates against those students and blurs what the true achievement gap is. Every standardized test since the beginning of time has done one thing relatively well. It's told us that higher scores on standardized tests are directly correlated to income. And those in poverty do less well, and those who are in the middle class or the upper classes do better. That's what the NAEP test has told us. That's what the CMTs told us. That is one of the accurate things that SBAC is telling us. So yes, your point is well taken. We need to focus on those children in their schools, the children in the greatest need in their schools, but also their communities. Because this is, if we are going to lift the educational opportunities of those in the greatest need, we can do some of that in the schools. But we must address the opportunity gap in those communities as well.
Are you trying to get rid of SBAC for this coming year? I mean, in the spring? You're hoping that the state will abandon it?
They did it in real short order at the high school level. With lightning speed, the state of Connecticut replaced SBAC with the SAT. We feel that our 3rd through 8th graders deserve no less.
So would you propose that they take no test in the spring, or do you think you could organize a replacement assessment by then, or what do you think?
Oh, you mean spring right around the corner?
Yes, right around the corner.
That's a very good question. We're going to work with the legislature on that. It may well be that the ship has sailed on this spring, but in terms of moving forward, we believe that we absolutely can make that change. Anything else?
And so are you guys, the union is still supportive of Common Core though, Common Core standards?
Yeah, you know, Common Core has been called a lot of different things, but we had our own Common Core. We didn't call it Common Core. In the state of Connecticut, we had our own strong standards for education prior to that. Common Core arguably builds on that, and whatever we call it in the future, we as the Connecticut Education Association strongly support high standards for educational excellence in Connecticut.
And just one last question, the state is always saying how, I guess that Connecticut had a lot of teachers involved with the creation of the Smarter Balance, who are sort of in helping to create the questions and all that. Is that, I mean, they talk about, is that not true? I mean, that's what they say, that there's a lot of Connecticut teachers who were involved with that.
You know, I think SBAC, they spent something like $350 million on the SBAC and PART tests, and they certainly reached out to a lot of folks. But in terms of the end product, I think I can speak for Connecticut teachers. No one ever came back to them and said, here it is, what do you think?
That's the whole thing.
That never happened.
Do you have a
Yes.
position on the SAT in 11th grade? Do you want that to be done?
Excuse me?
The SAT in 11th grade, is that something you support?
We supported moving away from SBAC. We believe that the SAT is not perfect, but it's certainly better to have less testing, less standardized testing of our high school students who are overly burdened with all sorts of testing at the present time. All right, thank you very much.